being able to take care of my kids, being able to be proud required me to get financially literate. It doesn't mean that I knew what that meant. I just knew that I can't be fucking broke anymore. I'm either gonna rob a bank or I'm gonna do something else, but I can't be broke anymore. But even if I would
Yeah,
have robbed the bank, I would have still been broke because
it's true.
I found out that it wasn't the amount of money that I didn't have money to begin with, but it wasn't the money that was causing the problem. It was a lot of my habits and a lot of the way that I looked at money and why I spent the money the way I spent.
What up, what up, what up, everybody? Happy week. I'm not going to tell you what day of the week it is because y'all don't need to know what day of the week we record sometimes. But thank y'all for tuning in with us. Just F and Go podcast with myself, Samuel Jimenez, and Charlie Herrera Villar. Please check us out on all major platforms. Like, subscribe, share it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and YouTube. Tap in with us. And even though I just said I'm not going to tell you what day we're recording on Saturday morning, August 15th. And I wanted to start out, because it's something that's super important to me, with a happy birthday and a rest in peace to Ermias Askedam, also known as Neighborhood Nipsey Hussle, also known as Thundercat. A big happy birthday and rest in peace, because a person that I think heavily influenced like the concept of this podcast, but also is a huge major influence in my personal life. I got, for people that are tuning in on YouTube, the Marathon Continues tattooed on my left forearm. And I got Nipsey behind me at all times. So it's a heavy thing to start out with, but also, I don't even think I would be in the midst of doing a project like this or doing a lot of things that I have done without the influence, the words, the wisdom of Nipsey Hussle. So a big happy birthday, and just thoughts and prayers with the family continuously, and the loved ones, and rest in peace to Nipsey Hussle the Great. Charlie, anything on that from you?
Yeah, man, I'll co-sign everything you said on that. To me, Nipsey was super inspiring. Obviously, I never met the cat, but he was a friend to me. He was a friend to me while I was on my journey, while I've been on my journey, as someone who I would, listen to as I'm going and go for support when I'm feeling my struggles, when I'm feeling those pressures coming on to me, or just feeling like, oh, what am I doing? Why am I doing this for that or this? And listening to, I mean, even with Victory Lap for sure, that album resonated with me deeply, and it was an every morning play going to work and just getting myself amped up and just reminding myself on why I do what I do, and that there's other people out there that are doing something that I want to achieve and are doing it at the same time that I'm doing it. So yeah, thank you for that, Nip, and happy birthday and rest in peace.
100%. I mean, for me, I'll tell a little bit of this story. The day growing up, we're both on the West Coast. We're both in the Bay Area. We both still have like ties to Los Angeles. So even on the West Coast, I mean, you heard, and everybody to some degree heard in it fairly early on the West Coast. I didn't become a big fan. Like, I knew his music, but his message really started to change around the time. Not that he didn't talk about like entrepreneurship, hustle, grind, work ethic early on, but early on it was there was a whole lot of gangbang stuff. And I'm with it at certain times of the day, but around the time Crenshaw dropped, which is 2013, when Crenshaw dropped, it changed my life, for multiple reasons, not just the music, but also the thought process behind Crenshaw, and the way that Nip went about using or creating the platform of Proud to Pay, selling it for $100, being doubted, whatever, and still flipping it and making it pop. When the day Nip passed, it was like a day that I'll never forget. It's one of those days, I think, for a lot of people that like you never forget where you were. And I remember I was in the middle of opening a bar. Like, we were still under construction, and I was heading to work that day to go and do some caulking on the back bar. So we weren't open yet. We were in the process of opening, and I hopped in my car. Hopped in my car, and I opened my phone, and like on Twitter, the first thing I saw was Nipsey Hussle had been shot. I start driving, and I'm scrolling through Twitter, still just refreshing, trying to see if it's real or not. Trying to see if it's real or not. Call my wife, have her on this. I'm driving, talking to my wife, and scrolling through Twitter. I know it's terrible, but it's a reality of what it was. And by the time I get to the bar, maybe like no more than 10 minutes in to getting there, because I'm still scrolling through Twitter the whole time, they announced that Nipsey Hussle passed away. And bruh, I don't cry much. I really don't. It's its own toxic thing that I'm sure we can address and talk about at another time, in terms of not being able to feel like I can feel those emotions or let them go, especially when I'm sober. I might cry if I'm drunk and I'm in a situation, but that day, I called my wife when the news dropped, and I told her I felt so deeply that I wanted to cry, but I didn't know how, and I couldn't. Like, my heart was crying inside, but I couldn't. Like, it wasn't coming out. Then I called my brother, and everybody knew. There's a lot of people calling me and texting me just because, like, everybody knew how much of an influential person Nip was on my life. And I called my brother, and as soon as I called my brother, I just let it all out, purged tears. And that was like the first time I remember crying to that degree while being sober for most of like my adult life. Just like, there's maybe a few other times, but it's very few and far between. And I like cried for an hour, about this loss of a person that I'd never met in my life. But also, Nip wasn't just a person who influenced me because of music. It wasn't like, yeah, I love the music, I rock with the music, but it was so much bigger because I fucked with Nipsey as a human. And I arguably watched or listened to more hours of his interviews than I did his music. And I would always, anytime I was going through a tough time or trying to figure out what move was next, I would always just put on a Nipsey Hussle interview and get some sort of inspiration or some sort of wisdom from it. And sometimes I get pretty sad nowadays because I'm like, I never have a new Nipsey interview to listen to. So if I feel that way, if I feel like that deeply about it, like that hurt about it, I can only imagine what people close to him feel. Because if he had that much of an impact on people he never met, I can only imagine the weight and the impact that he had on people close to him, to his family, to Lauren London, to his children. And that's to some degree a lot of like, anytime stuff like this happens, is the hardest part for me, is like, as a father, like I think about it, I'm like, man, those kids aren't going to have their father around anymore. So yeah, I know it's a heavy way to start the podcast, but I really wanted to start it out that way, because Nip was a person that was extremely important to me. So again, rest in peace, happy birthday to Ermias, Nipsey Hussle the Great.
Yeah. I guess I could reflect a little bit on me finding out on when he passed. I definitely, I remember I was at home. I had just I started my day, or I should say my vacation time off. I was about to take vacation, and my boy Suge called me, and or I think he may have texted me and let me know that somebody got nipped, and I couldn't believe it. Like I was telling you earlier, I thought Nip was untouchable. I thought, you're seeing somebody that was just doing everything correct, and like I said earlier, he became a friend to me because I didn't listen to a lot of his music prior to Victory Lap. Like, I knew who he was. Obviously, we found out who he was early on. And yeah, there was definitely changes from when the first time I heard him when he was a young kid to where he was during Victory Lap. But when I heard what he was talking about specifically in Victory Lap, man, I was like, I just felt connected because it was the first time I was seeing somebody doing what I wanted to do with that background that he had and at that platform and that level that he was at. And I just felt like, what? You know what I mean? Here's an inspiration. Here's somebody that is actually doing it in a major level. And so to me, he was just a friend. And I definitely, I'm a sensitive person, and I'm a pretty sensitive person. And for a long time, I'm always cool with crying. For a long time recently, I haven't been too much on crying. But with Nip Pass, it was definitely one of those things where I had to go for a drive. I had to clear my head, especially being off of work. The one thing that I usually escape everything with, I couldn't go to. And so I remember just pulling over on the side of the road and just, letting go for a bit. I just felt so hopeless. I felt like I lost a bit of hope because I really believed that Nip was bringing the change. And I mean, he did.
He was the one.
Yeah. And he did bring the change, right? Like, fortunately and unfortunately, it's a tragic way of doing it, but he brought a change and an awakening to a lot of the community, an awakening to reinvest in yourself and not just consume other people's shit, but to say that you're worth that and that your hood is worth that and that you got value. And maybe, who knows, right? Maybe his Victory Lap album would have reached some heads because it did reach a lot of people. But I think with his passing, I think more people got an opportunity to listen to him, unfortunately, through that method of doing it or through that tragedy that happened. But I mean, he brought the change, right? And Pac always said that he's not going to change the world, but he'll spark the brain that will change the world. And Nip is one of those. I think Kendrick's one of those. There's quite a bit of people. There's people that we don't know about that are doing that, right? There's people that aren't in that level that are doing that. And I want to thank them and the way that you were with Nip and how you're looking forward to his next or that you would listen to a lot of his interviews and it would guide you. That's how I was with Pac, right? The difference with Pac and Nip was that as I was coming to listen to Pac in like 96, I was like in third grade, fourth grade. He was already passing by the time I was even getting the ability to look to look into that. So there was a crap load of learning that I got to do about Pac through my upbringing. When it comes to Nip, one of the things that also got me so much was knowing like, this is it. It's not like he's sitting down for a minute. It's not like he's doing a bit and he's taking some time off and he'll come back with a dope album. And nah, we saw it. We saw the rise and we saw where it ends. And I think that was another thing that got me was just knowing that I'm not going to hear a comeback album. I'm not going to hear another venting of how he gets up from this moment,
Yeah. There's a few interviews, and like I was talking about with you before, like there are lyrics that'll make me sad. That'll make me like, damn, man, like he has so much left in him. There's an interview with him on Rap Radar with Elliott Wilson after Victory Lap was released and after Victory Lap was nominated for Grammy for Hip Hop Album of the Year. And Elliott Wilson asked him, he's like, in the process of making this album, because that was his first commercial release. Mm-hmm. That was his first official album, right? Mm-hmm. And man has been in the game for 10, 15 years and finally put out his first studio album, right?
Yep.
And Elliott was like, what did you learn from this album that you felt you could do better? And Nip was like, I can't even really tell y'all, but y'all gonna find it, or y'all gonna find out on the second album. And every time I listen to that interview and I hear that, I'm like, fuck.
Damn.
There ain't no second album.
Life's funny.
Yeah, and I think with what we wanted to talk about today, I think it falls on a day that like makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Nip to me is a person that really influenced me in a lot of ways to understand business more, to not necessarily just. I think a lot of us that come from situations like where you're a little bit, underprivileged, underserved communities, right? I think a lot of us grow up with just a natural work ethic, like a natural hustle, right? And that can be applied a lot of ways. And Nip was one of the first people that I found that it wasn't just like, all right, grind. It was like, think about everything that you're doing, right? And like Nip had lyrics. One of my favorite lyrics from Nip is off of the Crenshaw album, off of Face the World, when he's like, "Long flights get my mind right. Victory to me is when you get." Let me run that back. Long flights get my mind right. Victory to me is when you spend your time right. Victory to me is when you get your grind right. Victory to me is when you get your moms right. And to me, like, because what we wanted to talk about today was a lot of just financial responsibility, financial wellness, our own journeys on that. And to me, it's like I knew it was Nip's birthday, but I didn't realize that we were recording on that like the same day. But to me, it makes a lot of sense because it's like Nip was one of the first people that really exposed to me the power of like financial responsibility and financial wellness and being able to understand the way your money works. So that's so much a part of my journey because Crenshaw made me quit my job. I was a cable guy before I was a bartender. And the release of Crenshaw and everything that had behind it, the process of doing that made me realize, like, I don't want to do this shit for the rest of my life. And so I quit without a plan. But it also made me start taking my finances more seriously. With Nip being a huge influence on me with a bunch of things, but especially with like financial literacy and what we're going to talk about today, Charlie, do you have anybody or anything or any event that really motivated you or sparked that interest in you to really start looking at finances in a different way and become more financially literate? Or take us through a little bit of your journey at the beginning of it.
Yeah. For me, what influenced me was my failure. It was my illiteracy, I guess. Right. I had just gotten into a hole. I was in. When you don't have financial stability, you can't stand up. You can't do shit. And there was, I think, that and the pressure of wanting to be free. The pressure also of just being an immigrant and being like, what did you come here to this country for? What it is. So that being able to take care of my kids, being able to be proud required me to get financially literate. It doesn't mean that I knew what that meant. I just knew that I can't be fucking broke anymore. I'm either going to rob a bank or I'm gonna do something else, but I can't be broke anymore. But even if I would have robbed the bank, I would have still been broke because
it's true.
I found out that it wasn't the amount of money that I didn't have money to begin with, but it wasn't the money that was causing the problem. It was a lot of my habits and a lot of the way that I looked at money and why I spent the money the way that I spent. So,
yeah, one thing I heard early on that didn't resonate with me until I started learning more was like, how can you ever expect to manage $1 million if you can't manage $1,000? Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But continue on. Go ahead with what you were saying.
So I got into a hole early on in my life. I just started fast, man. I had a kid. Well, before I even had a kid, I had a job. My first job, I was 15. I worked at Funko-Land in Southland Mall.
Shout out Funko-Land.
Shout out Funko-Land. Man, fuck Funko-Land. But like, it was cool. It was a tough gig, right? But it was cool. My mom actually hooked me up with a job there because she used to work for PlayStation. And so she knew some of the people there because she would go store to store. So that there was a pressure there. And the pressure started early on of don't let my mom down because her connect just got you into this job. And even if it was shit, you had to perform to the top because now you're dirtying your mom's name and her reputation with you. And that, for some reason, I mean, it started off like that and it just kept on going. With the rest of my life, it was always like, don't fucking dishonor your family. You better put in work. But I got into the hole because, I wasn't getting paid that much, but I got a credit card early on, right? For like Wells Fargo that usually comes to you quickly as soon as you turn 18, like, oh, let's get a credit card. And I remember I bought like $200 subwoofer for my car, right? And I was like, cool, put this on the fucking credit card. You know what I mean? And then they're like, oh, just make the minimum payments. But, your interest rate's like 26% at that time, right? So I did the minimum payment. And then I didn't understand interest rates, and it just kept coming. And that shit got expensive quick. And I didn't make enough money at that time anyway to really pay that shit off. And I didn't understand why it just kept on coming up. And I'd keep on spending other things by, something else. Not too much, but just something else. And shortly afterwards, at 17, I had a kid. So expenses, started building up a lot more. And I worked for another job. This time I actually worked for a company that my mom and my stepdad had created. And it wasn't a lot of money. It was still $12 an hour. This is back in 2004. So that was a lot of money, but I was only working on the weekends, but all that shit was just going to my kid, and then going to towards like child support as well and all that. You got issues growing up.
Yeah.
And I moved to LA. There was things going on. I moved to LA. I started acting, and I realized that I was. So let's go with how I was spending money. I viewed spending money as expressing love, right? I want to buy my friends this, or I want to, even all the way till I got a little bit older, where I'd buy drinks for my friends. It was just my form of showing that I cared, showing that this is what it means to me. So I'm gonna spend it. And I learned that from my mom, because she worked all day, all night, 3 jobs, and we didn't spend too much time together. But she would buy me big, expensive gifts because that's her love language. And also, I think it was just to say, hey, I don't get to see you because I'm investing my time in this, so I'm gonna give you the fruits of my labor, and here's this gift or that.
Yeah.
When I was living in LA, I worked for Nordstrom, and I was getting paid commission, and I had my own apartment in downtown. So just the income was never there. There was never enough money for the lifestyle that I was living and for the cost of living that it was. So I had a lot of holes in my boat, and the credit cards didn't help. Even if I borrowed money from family members, or not even borrowed money, but they're like, hey, let me help you while you're trying to pursue your dream of acting in LA. I'll help you fund this and that. And it was bad, just the habits. And it wasn't like I was overspending. I just didn't make enough for the lifestyle that I lived. It wasn't like I bought clothes for sure. I bought a lot of stuff. I spent shit. I'm not even going to front. I definitely spent shit. When I got with my lady, my wife now, she came at a time where I was like pretty broke. I was still able to kind of stay afloat, but I was pretty broke. And it was embarrassing for me. I found out my credit was bad because my boy Suge, he was starting his business. He was like, yo, I tapped out my line of credit on this business strategy. Can I borrow $20K from you? And I'm like, well, let's go to the bank. Let's go to Wells Fargo. Let me get a loan for you, right? So I went to Wells Fargo, got a loan to see if I could get a loan, because I figured I had an apartment, so my credit score was cool. I found out my credit score was like in the low 5s, and I was like, oh, I don't even know what the fuck that means. I had no idea how that shit worked. Yeah. I was in collections, bro. I swear to God, I was in collections for a poetry book from the LA library, dog. Like, that's how bad my shit got.
For like $30?
Something like that.
Skyrocket.
Dude, and it was bad. So my lady kind of started putting me up on game, because she was definitely more. She was all about security. She had great credit, and it was embarrassing for me to not understand money, to just not know how to play the game. And so I started reading books. I read Susie Orman's book. I didn't read the Dave Ramsey book until later on. But what I started doing to fix my credit, just because I got tired let me add, I lost my job at one point. And when I lost my job, those child support payments, I thought they stopped because they're like, okay, cool, we'll stop it because, you're on fucking unemployment for a minute. So I lost my job. I thought child support payments stopped. They didn't. They kept going. So they started accruing for a while. That shit cost even more on your credit score. So that shit went down even more. It even cost me an opportunity to be hired on by Alameda County Fire Department, because I didn't know how much of the effect credit has in hiring and everything. And so there was a time where, while I was paying all that stuff off, people ain't gonna fuck with you if you're in debt or you have that. And I never felt like I was in debt because I didn't owe anybody personally. Nobody that I knew. Like, I didn't borrow money from friends or any of that. But there was institutions and stuff that my credit history says it's not good because this dude's in debt. So I came back to the Bay. I worked at the restaurant. Restaurant gives you cash, so you feel like you always got money in your pocket because you're earning that cash. But you're also depressed as shit at work from going through all that abuse from clients. Or from guests. So then you start going and drinking at the bar, and every night is a drink. Every night is a beer, and you're buying rounds. So eventually what happened was, my lady's like, yo, I'm going to give you $300 and we're going to put you on a secured credit card. So embarrassing as shit. Like humiliating, right? To feel like your girl's gonna have to bail you out, or to even think about having a secured card, because like for me, not being able to afford something or not having a credit card that you have to feel secured, it's like a hit on your pride, on your ego, right? You feel like you're not, your friends are able to do it and you can't do it. You must be a broke ass chump. You must be lazy. You don't know how to work. And that's how I felt. That's not the case. I'm one of the hardest workers out there. I just didn't know how to handle the money when I got it. So the secured card taught me, right? And a secured card, for those people that don't know, is it's a prepaid card. It's a prepaid credit card. So you can only spend what you put into it. From there, I learned to, I only put fixed expenses on there. So I put things that I'd have to pay every month at the same price, and I paid it off at the end of every month. So I put my phone bill on there, and it was always going to be 120 or whatever it is, and it would pay that shit off on automatic payments all the time. And after a while, that started increasing my credit score a little bit more. And then from there, I got onto Credit Karma, and that helped me keep track of what credit is, how it works. So that became like a game for me to kind of learn all that, you know. And then I finally got another credit card. Once my credit score was improved, because you needed to have multiple lines of credit, right? You can't just have one, and then you also have to have credit history. And you learn all that through Credit Karma, or if you start becoming more aggressive into finding out how that game works or whatever. After I got that card, I did the same thing, right? I only put fixed expenses on that, paid that off in full. Finally, my prepaid or my secured card after a while became a regular card. Like, they took me off that probation, and I kept it the same way. I got another card, did the same thing, and just kind of started playing that game. It's not about maxing it out, but it is about fucking paying the whole thing off, keeping it under like 30% or 10% or 1% is where I'm at now of how much I use that credit card. I'll get to that later. But from there, I also started opening my mail. I was aggressive at opening my mail, because for a while I was always worried about like, oh, is this going to be a fucking debt collector? Is this going to be that? I don't want to do that. It's so intimidating. I was like, fuck that. Go after what scares you. I started opening every piece of mail I got as soon as I got it. And that helped me out, because I wasn't scared anymore. I was just like, what you got? Because there's no way I'm missing a payment. There's no way I'm doing any of that, you know?
Which I think is an important thing to emphasize, right? Is that, like, when it comes to this topic, when I try to have this conversation with certain people that I love oftentimes, right? You realize that a lot of people are scared of money. Like, they're scared of having that conversation because I mean, not everybody, but a lot of people have made mistakes with money. And, like, you dig yourself into a hole and you're scared of addressing that hole because you realize, oh shit, what did I do to myself, right? But the only way you're gonna dig yourself out of the hole is by, addressing it in the first place.
Yeah.
But I think fear is like, you can't be scared of it anymore. But continue on.
Yeah, it's fear and embarrassment, right? It's fear of like looking at yourself and saying you fucked up, and that's tough, man. And what's on the other side? And I tell you, if you don't open what's on the other side gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So you got to fucking stop it while it's there. So after a while, from doing those habits, I was able to increase my credit score significantly. Even to the point of passing my lady's credit score, which was crazy for me and crazy for her, because, it was whatever. And what it taught me was, it wasn't about being lazy. It wasn't about being, broke. It was about just not knowing how the game goes. Because once you know how that game goes, and you tie that up with your work ethic and with your standards of just understanding the game, you're gonna get better. You're gonna get really good. And the more you attack those fears, the better you do. So then I started barbering. And when I started barbering, luckily at the shop that I placed myself at, like where I positioned myself to go, it was a shop that charged a lot more, valued itself a lot more, and I was able to make more money. I started making a lot more money than I ever had in my life, because now I had control of how much I made. I wasn't dependent on an hourly rate or commission. Well, technically I do get commission, but I got a chance to say, here's how much I want to work. Here's how many people I'm willing to take. And I was working 10 to 12 hours a day and 5 days a week. So I was like, boom, I'm about to make this money. But when I made money, I made sure to not have a lifestyle inflation. A lot of people, when they start making more money, they start spending more money because they're like, oh, I'm making way more than I did before. So now I'm just going to spend a little bit more. And instead, I tried doing the opposite. So I would put away $500 at the beginning of every month. Before I did anything else, I'd pay myself $500. I wanted to save for either a motorcycle, I want to save for whatever. My own barbershop. So I just been putting away $500 a month. And then once I kind of hit a certain goal, my wife and I decided that we're going to have a kid. So when we planned for having a kid, we started practicing living off of one income. And we'd practice because we thought she was going to be on maternity leave. And we figured, okay, well, we're going to have to just live off of my income. And turned out to be the opposite. Fast forward to this pandemic, and now we're living off of her income because she's a teacher, so she still gets paid. But luckily, because we were able to train for a while on saying how do we minimize our expenses and how do we control the inflation of our lifestyle, and train ourselves to be like, this is what we need. These are the essential things to keep it going. We ended up being okay during this time. So that's definitely helped out. But most importantly, it's been a psychological thing. Before, to me, it was shown, like, I'm not even going to blame hip hop, but the reality is that hip hop, I think there was a stat that I saw that majority of people that listen to hip hop are in debt. And that's because hip hop is a commercial, right? A lot of hip hop songs are about buying this, I got that, I bought this bag, I don't look at the price. And that's up to you if you want to be an individual that just consumes that idea. But where Nipsey changed the game was he went all money in, right? He wasn't talking about like the consuming. He was talking about putting value into yourself. And I think I was able to I was able to connect with that a little bit more. And I started realizing that what matters about making money isn't how much you're spending. It's about how much you got in your bank account. It's about how you're investing that into yourself or into other companies, and how do you make more money, not how much you spent.
I think you touch on a lot of important things in terms of like figuring out how to manage it and what to do on the journey. Big thing for me, and you touch on it, and the importance of paying yourself first. And for some people, if you don't understand what paying yourself first means, right? It's the concept is basically like treat yourself, treat your savings, treat your investments, treat yourself like a bill, right? One thing that I heard that I always think back on is like there are different types of people in the world, right? There irresponsible people get paid and then they spend it on discretionary spending. They spend it on clothes, food, nights out, whatever, right? And then after that, they figure out how much money they have to pay their bills or whatever, right? Then responsible people, they'll get paid and then pay their bills first. And they'll pay their bills, and then whatever they have left over, they'll discretionary spending, spend it on what they want to spend it on. And then you have smart people, and smart people get paid, pay themselves first, and then pay their bills, and then use discretionary spending, however. So what that means is basically the strategy that I employ is basically, it depends on where my wife and I are at the time in terms of what our expenses are or the money that we're getting paid. But we always take a percentage of money out of every check that we get paid, right? So, at the current time being, we take 20% out of every check every time we get paid. And we put that into a couple of separate accounts in the way that our savings and works. But, when Charlie's talking about paying yourself first, it's important to prioritize it. One thing I tell people all the time is when it comes to time is you never have time for anything that you don't make time for. And it's the same way with money. You're never going to have the money you want unless you're intentional about it and saving it, right? So whether it's like taking out $500 like Charlie was talking about at the beginning of every month and putting that to the side, or a strategy like even if you start out with like 5% of every paycheck, or even if what you can afford is like $50 out of every time you get paid, right? Put that to the side. Pay yourself first, whatever you find that you can pay yourself, and then build from there. In terms of like my own journey, I came into a situation early on in life where when I was straight out of high school, it just kind of became to some degree man of the house in a lot of ways. My pops is still here, and my older brother, had his own things going on. But my pops had a heart attack literally right after I got out of high school. And so, he couldn't work for a while, and my mom didn't have the income to support the family as a whole. So, straight out of high school, that's when I became a cable guy, and I was very fortunate to have a quote unquote grown up job straight out of high school, and I was a boy in a man's world working with 30, 40-year olds. And so I was very fortunate to be able to have a steady income in that sense. But I was also never taught. I was never taught what it meant to be financially literate. I was never taught what credit was and how to manage it. I was never taught, how to manage your money, how to balance what you would think as balancing a checkbook in the past, but to understand reconciling your finances and balancing and figuring out what to prioritize and how categorical spending works, right? So never taught any of that. And one of the biggest, I got married at 21. Me and my wife have been married for 9 years now, and I got married early. But
Congrats on that, bro. That's huge.
thanks. We made, I think we both talk about it all the time. If we were to do it over again, we wouldn't spend the amount that we spent on that wedding at all. And it was a beautiful wedding. I look back on it, and it was just an amazing day. Such a great day. The photos and memories we have left over from that day, I guess you wouldn't trade that for the world, but would I? I don't know, maybe. I spent that was for me what got us in debt fast. And really took a hit on our credit scores. And that's when I guess the relearning process really started. Because of that, just like you said, I had dug myself a hole. We had dug ourselves a hole with the spending that we had on the wedding. That it was something, again, like you said, we were just afraid of and embarrassed to confront for a long period of time. And again, it wasn't really until I quit my job as a cable guy and put more pressure on myself to figure out how to make up that income, that we really started to figure out finances again. And, as much as I feel like Charlie reads more than I do, but, the two names you mentioned, Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey, I spent a lot of time not necessarily reading their books, but watching their content and watching as much as Dave Ramsey, you can read Dave Ramsey's book, sure. But there's also other ways that you can consume that content to better understand financial literacy. Dave Ramsey has a podcast. He has a YouTube show that you can tune in, and he'll give you that information, right? So the most important thing for me to learn how to do to better manage my money was to basically, I reconcile my finances at least monthly. So at the end of the month, I'll look at all of our spending. I'll look at all of our income. I'll categorize all of it so I know exactly where my money is going, where every single penny of mine is going, right? And then I categorize it in a bunch of different categories. This is what we spent on, this is what we spent on groceries. This is what we spent on utilities. This is what we spent on housing. This is what we spent on lifestyle, discretionary spending. This is what we spent on eating out. This is what we spent on transportation costs, right? And that was the biggest thing to me that when I finally sat down to start doing that, you realize how much money you can spend by cutting out so many of your small costs, right? When people think about being broke or, think about not having the money, it's oh, I can't afford to pay this bill, or I can't afford to, pay for this big thing, right? When really it's not the big things that kill your finances a lot of times. It's the small things. It's small spending. It's, eating out a lot, right? Eating out, any unused subscriptions that you may have, right? You may have if you don't keep track of your subscriptions on your iPhone or whatever it is that you have, your laptop, your iPad, you get Apple TVs, right? You don't realize that $7.99, $9.99, $12.99, $15.99, all of that over a period of time adds up, right? And you realize, oh, I have these unused subscriptions that I'm spending like $200 on a month. That some of them I just forgot about, and they just keep coming out every month, and that's where the bleeding happens. It's not the big stuff, it's the small stuff. So
I
to
try
me,
to
like,
check that like once. Sorry
yeah,
about that. Like at least if you can check it once a year or at the end of the year or quarterly to just be like, how many of my subscriptions am I actually using? Because sometimes you forget, and sometimes you're like, I
yeah,
don't even use this shit anymore.
yeah,
So yeah,
100%. And those are like the small things that'll bleed you out. So I think that is always to like I always recommend that to people. It's like the first step for me, like Dave Ramsey talks about 7 baby steps, right? But to me, the first real step that people should take is really taking a look at your spending. What are you spending money on versus what your income is? And then you do the math on like your categorical spending. I spent 500 this month on eating out. Do I really need to do that? Right? If I can save 300 of that, maybe I only spend 200 on eating out because it's something that I like to do or something that I value. If I only do $200, I still got 300 left. And what can I use that 300 towards? Right? I can put that in a high interest savings account. I can invest with that money, whatever you want to do, right? Or yeah, you can just build that savings up. But I think unless you really know what you're spending your money on, then it's going to be hard for you to ever really build yourself back up. So I always recommend to people, man, figure out a way, whether it's using an app. I'm like a spreadsheet nerd. So like I have my own Excel spreadsheet. I update it every month. I try to do it weekly. Some weeks are busier than others, so I can't get to it. So maybe it's like bi-weekly. But that way every month I know exactly where my money is, exactly what I'm spending on. And then my wife and I review it. And we review it and say, okay, what did we do good this month? What can we be better on? Where can we cut spending? Or it's just like for future planning, and like, all right, if this is something we want to do, then if this is something that we want to do, then this is how much we need to do it. And, we can start putting money aside for that. Right. So I think there are just different ways that you can go about doing that. Mint is an app that allows you to do that. So there's a lot of like app-based resources out there, but it's important to me to just understand that, and then from there you can. It's money is a game. Money is a game. My boy Trav once told me, I don't want money because I want money. Like, I don't want money to be rich. I want money because money buys me time. Money allows me, like, time and freedom and energy to, like, do the things that I want to do. Because I'm not stressing about, am I going to have enough to pay rent? Am I going to have enough to pay my phone bill? Am I going to have enough to put gas in my car, right? When you have it and you're comfortable and you know that money's in the bank, then you can live life in a whole different free way. So... do you have tips for people in terms of like understanding their spending more?
Yeah. So I think you hit it right on the button. When it comes to first step is definitely finding out like your profit and loss. Like find out how much you're making and what you're spending it on. I think hands down that taught me so much, because if you don't know what your take home is and then where you're losing all your money, you can't even start. You don't even know what's going down. So that's definitely the first thing. Another thing was, my friend and I have this conversation all the time because he has some of the same I think a lot of us men have a sense of pride when it comes to money, right? And there's times where he's like, what do I do, bro? Like, my girl wants to go out to eat, or she likes the lifestyle of going out to eat. And we've agreed that, we're going to split the bill. But when it comes down to it, I don't split the bill. I pay the whole thing and all this other stuff. You got to be real with yourself. You got to be real with yourself as a human to say, put your pride aside. If you can't afford to go out, if you can't afford to go out and tip, don't go out.
Stay your ass at home.
Stay your ass at home. Do it for all of us. But two, like, do it for yourself, man. Be real. Like, when you have money to go out, like, have money to say I got 20% for the tip, I got this much for the drinks, I got that much for this, and if my lady wants to do something, set money aside, plan that date out, like not just plan out the occasion, plan out the finances on how you're going to go to that, so that you could spend freely without hurting your pockets, because you know you've already allocated funds for that type of stuff, and that takes effort, right? Everybody's like, people might not want to do all that work, but I mean, life takes effort and intentionality. Another thing that my lady and I did during my process of figuring out financial literacy and getting myself out of debt was, when we moved in together, she was like, all right, we got to find a place that we can afford. And so 30% of our take home has to go towards rent. So 30% of both of our take homes individually. So she calculated what 30% of her take home was, and I calculated what 30% of my take home was. And I felt like a chump because my income wasn't nearly as much as hers, especially with in the food and beverage industry. Sometimes it fluctuates. You got some fast times or busy times, you got some slow times. So you got to take what you really think is the real accurate thing. And it's painful sometimes because you might not be making that much money. You're like, fuck, what the hell? But you take the 30% of that and you say, okay, I can only afford, let's say $400. Well, then you got to find a place that it's either, let's say she could afford $800, that's 30% of hers, and yours is $400, then you get a $1,200 apartment. And then you work from there until, and the beauty of that is that you're now not stressing off a rent, because before, when I was living in LA, I was making about like maybe $1,000 a month, and my rent was like $900, and then I finally found a spot that was $725. You know what I mean? So I didn't have that much wiggle room for food. I was eating at the dollar store, getting all my shit from there. It was just fucking peanut butter sandwich, you know what I mean, and fucking avocados. Like, that's it. So find out what you make, what you spend, and then 30% on home. That's gonna help you a lot, and it's expensive out here. So roommate.
It is, but the reality is, and that's an important thing that you touch on. And I'll share a little bit of my like personal. When I realized it got bad, right? Like you said, in the food and beverage industry, you have good times, you have bad times, right? And I've been extremely fortunate, and a lot of that, like, I don't necessarily believe in luck. I believe like luck is like the cross section between preparation and opportunity, right? So, like, there was a year, fairly recently, where like we were doing our taxes at the end of the year, and I wasn't necessarily good with finances at this point. And I looked at like what I'd made in the year, and I was like, I never like necessarily made it a goal, but it was like the first year I cleared six figures, like solely cleared six figures by myself. And then I looked at it and I was like, I ain't got shit to show for it, bro. Like, I ain't got shit to show for it. And that made me feel like shit. And it was like, how the fuck can I clear, like, because when you're a kid, like, you don't realize it. Like, you don't realize like that, how much, like, what money is and how much is like a lot of money, right? Like, you don't really have like a lot of kids don't grow up with like the concept of like what a lot of money is versus a little money. But I was like, what made me like start taking it serious is like I cleared six figures for the first time. My parents probably never did when I was growing up. And I was like, how the fuck do I not have anything left at the end of the year? So I was like, all right, we got to figure it out. And so, at that point in time, my credit score was shit. And like, I'm the same way that you are when you're talking about it, right? If I'm going out with everybody, like, I'm just a very hospitable person. I want to connect with people. I want everybody to feel good. Like, all right, let's go. I'll buy the shots. I'll buy the drinks. If we're taking a trip, I'll take care of the room. I'll take care of gas, whatever. Like, don't even worry about it. I got it. I'm always like the I got it guy. Don't worry about it. Because one thing I'm confident in, one thing I've always been confident in, is like, even when I didn't know how to manage money, I know how to get money. Like, I know I'm gonna be all right because I know how to hustle. Like, I don't have pride. Like, I'll fucking go mow people's lawns. I'll go fucking wash windows if I have to. If that's like what it takes for me to like get what I need to get, then I'll do it. So I've never felt pressure of like, oh, I don't know how to make money, so I have to save it, or I have to like be very stingy with it. But you're right. It's also a very prideful thing, and like it's a thing where it's like you got to stop having that pride. You got to realize what you can spend on, what you can't spend on, and be okay with that. And be okay with being like, this is the reality of my situation. I need to be better, and I've dug myself in a hole. This is how much I need to get out of that hole. Maybe it's going to take me 6 months. Maybe it's going to take me a year. Maybe it's going to take me 3 years. But I don't want to be in this situation forever. So, all right, let's figure it out. And let's figure out how much money I can throw at this problem to get myself out of it. Are there any specific tools you use, resources you use, whether it's like apps or I don't know. Like I said, I use I love spreadsheets, so I keep track of my finances in Excel spreadsheet that I have a template for. But is there anything you use to help better manage your finances?
Yeah. Also, you touched on earlier about how, how we talked about, I wish I didn't spend that much money on my wedding. Super true. And because, you could put a down payment on a house and all that shit, right? And
Yeah.
we were lucky enough to get a pretty big gift to throw the wedding in the first place. But even then, we were like, do we want to spend money on a wedding, or would we rather buy a house? And we were under the same circumstances of like, but what about these memories, or what about those? And, it's hard to say, right? It's still hard to say. But what we did do was we wanted to make sure that we went into our marriage for sure debt free. And so what we ended up doing was, some people put like their, what's that shit called, where you go and scan and, you tell people what you want and shit like that, right? Like you want a
Like
gift.
registries.
Yeah, that thing. So for the registry, we did really only what we needed, and we didn't really need too many actual items because of we had already been living together, so we already had our furnished our apartment and shit. So we said, hey, if you want to donate to a honeymoon fund, you can, or here are the things that we can do, right? So we used the money from whatever money we got, we used it for a honeymoon fund. And then mostly we used any gift, any monetary gift, went to paying off any debt that we still had prior to that. So we didn't do it to spend anything else. It was just like, cool, thank you. Because honestly, the best gift you can have during a wedding or for a marriage is being debt free. Like that is the best thing, to start off your new life together with just building and not having to recover. And so if anybody is going to get married and they're debating what to do with the money, put that shit into your debt and fucking start off clean if you can. So to me, that's one of the dopest gifts that you can have. As for the apps that I use or the techniques that I've used to kind of keep my shit together, I started off with the Every Dollar Counts app for sure. And then I did that for a little bit. My wife still uses that a lot more than I do. Since I get paid like cash, actually, no, for the most part, most of my payments are in credit cards. A lot of that is already tracked and stocked on, Square or whatever. But spreadsheets definitely work for setting goals, for keeping track of what I've spent, keeping track of my tips, keeping track of everything else. And then right before PPP, right before this whole thing went down, I try to I have my own LLC, right? It's called Swiss Army Charlie Barber and Style. And I try to make it as legit as possible, right? Like practice how you play. And so those things come with expenses, whether it's the LLC fee and all that. But you want to track it and be as true to what corporations and other successful businesses do so that your P&L. So then I ended up getting QuickBooks because I listened to this girl on YouTube. I'll get her name on here by the end of it. She's a tax consultant. She's freaking phenomenal.
For people that also like when Charlie says P&L is profit and loss. So like if you aren't familiar with like in the business world, like profit and loss statements are like the fucking like it's what you live your life off of, right? So when you talk about P&Ls, I think you can. I mean, Charlie did mention profit and loss on a personal level earlier, but it's just important to understand, what you're bringing in versus what is going out.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking for the lady that I follow, and give me 1 second. And I definitely recommend other people, especially if you are I'll find it later. I'll put it on there. Especially if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an independent business owner, like you want to get your taxes together. And you want to have all your expenses, your gas money, all that thing accounted for. So QuickBooks works, and I'm not advocating for that. There's hella other programs that do that stuff. QuickBooks was what I was using. Right now, because of this pandemic, I took that shit off because why am I paying $15 a month for something I can't even use at this moment, right? So, but it works to keep track of everything and pay your taxes, man, if you're a barber, if you're anything else, because thankfully for being so rigid, I paid quarterly, and I was paying about $3,000 to $5,000 every quarter, I believe it was on taxes. And you estimate how much you're gonna make at the end of the year, and then you put that on there, and then hopefully you get some back. And for the most part, you probably will get some back unless your calculations are spot on. But that helps out because during the moment when you need PPP or you need unemployment now, they're gonna go off of how much you've made, and if you're not claiming everything that you're making, then you're not going to be getting a lot back, right? So it's going to take a little money to make money. That's how life goes. Uncle Sam wants his money, and then you'll get your money back if everything worked accordingly. But that also is important for buying a house, which to buy a house, you need obviously a really good credit score, and you need a proof of income of how much you have. So can we talk about credit score for a bit? And
Yeah, 100%.
So something we were talking about is that people sometimes when it comes to credit card, they're like, oh, it's someone told me that it's important to have, a balance on there for, they don't want you to pay the whole thing off. It looks better if you have some money on there. I think that's a bunch of bullshit for me personally, because it depends on your interest rate, right? If you're going to get charged hella money for them to think, oh, I like you, man, fuck that. I'm not going to pay you for you to like me. I'll borrow the money and I'll pay it back in full. And I'll be consistent with it. And it might take you a little bit, but being consistent with it is going to increase your credit score. And then also keeping your usage of credit to a minimum to they say 30% or less, but I'm saying 10% to 1%. If you could do that, do that and pay the full thing off. You're going to get to a point where your credit score is excellent, right? Above 750. And then up to 850. But there's going to be a point, because I have friends that are like, oh man, I'm trying to get to 8. So I'm going to spend more on this. I'm going to spend more on that. Fuck that. Once you're at the excellent mark, yeah, you'll probably get more money lent to you. But why do you don't need to get money lent unless you are really trying to go into a big venture. And even then, you probably want to have already money stacked up for that, because if it's that risky of yours that you need even more money, should probably reconsider real quick or find another way to get that money first. There comes to a point where I am not going to jeopardize my income or my stability in life to get a higher credit score. If I'm at 750, if I'm at 790, if I'm at 850, I don't need to get to the very fucking top by spending hella or adding more credit cards or this and that. I'm at my sweet spot. I'm good here. Recognize what credit is good for and where it starts hurting you.
100, but I think you touch on something super key there is to be comfortable with where you're at, right? To be comfortable with where you're at and what you need. You don't need, would 800 be great to have? Sure. But do you need it? Is it a necessary thing, right? I mean, I guess it depends on what your goals are and what you want in life. But for a lot of people, just that self-awareness of being as long as I'm in an excellent range, as long as I'm in a very good range, that I'm solid, I can do the things that I want to do. But when it comes to credit, I think you're right. There's a lot of misinformation out there. The things that the way that people or the way that these credit bureaus will score your credit, right, are based on a number of things. Credit card utilization is one of them, but the available credit to you is a part of it too, right? So like Charlie's saying, a lot of people say 30%. You don't need to use your credit cards at all to some degree to build credit, because the fact that you have that available credit to you and that you've made all of your payments on time, if you buy a $5, I don't know, ice cream, you know what I'm saying, or whatever it is, if you just go to the gas station, a lot of times I'll just use my credit cards for gas, maybe one time a month, boom, put gas on there and just pay that $30 off, right? Because at the end of the day, the things that matter are the amount of credit you have available to you, how the on-time payments on your credit card, and then the age of your credit. Obviously, there are other things that have to do with credit outside of credit cards, right? Like making sure that your other accounts are in line in terms of not having things in collections. But for the most part, when it comes to credit cards, like it's it's false information to tell people like, oh, you have to spend in order to build your credit. You don't technically have to, but it's also false information for people to be like, oh, credit cards are bad, which I think a lot of people in our community sometimes hear because maybe your parents were burned by bad credit because of overspending on credit cards before, so they tell you, no, never get a credit card because it's bad. They just rip you off. Because there's a lot of people that are jaded in that way. Instead of telling you like, hey, get a credit card, don't really spend on it. Just make your on time payments. If you are going to spend on it, make sure you account for that every month. If you want to pay your phone bill every month with that credit card, make sure you account for that and just pay it off when you have to pay it off. But at the end of the day, like the most important thing is just make sure that you have it available to you if you need it. That's what they love to see, and that you're making your on-time payments. And everything else after that just takes time. Like credit, if you have shitty credit or if you have no credit, it's not going to happen overnight. Like you're
Yeah.
not going to be able to rebuild or just build credit overnight. You're going to realize it's a long-term investment. And that it's just as long as you're doing things the right way over time, it'll continue to build. And then as you start to make more money, as you start to uh, you know bring in more income, then there are different ways of making that credit available to you.
And what I do too, man, is like it's not like I use my credit card every fucking day. That's all I use is my credit card. But it's because I know how much I require to spend a month. Like I know that when I was working, my lifestyle was, yo, we're gonna spend $5,000 every fucking month, right? It's gonna be on rent. It's about 18, 1950 on rent. It's going to be $200 on groceries every 2 weeks, so probably $400, right? More than likely. Gas. I mean, I knew the numbers, and it was going to amount to 5 racks. So then what I would do is I'd be like, all right, cool. Everything's going to go. Find the best. Like, here's how credit cards can work. There's credit cards that give you money back, cash back, points, all that shit, right? So if you know what you're spending on, use those credit cards like, I'm not even going to say the names, but ones that give you 1.5 cash back or 3, depending on if you're going out to eat or not. So that's what I would do. Okay, cool. This is going to give me this many points. And I rack those up. I pay the full thing off at the end of the month because I already know how much I'm going to spend. I know how much I got for it. Just pay it all off so I don't accrue a balance. I don't have a running balance on it. And then I make the points for it. Now, points are tricky, right? Points and all those shit. Like a lot of people see that as a game, as in, oh, but if I do this, I'll get more points. Like the time that it is a game is when you get a brand new card and they say, if you spend like 5,000 on this in the first month, we'll give you 10,000 extra points. Okay, cool. If you got a wedding coming up or if you got something that you already got the money for and you have that set income or that set amount of money, use that card there, get that extra money from them, from those points, and then pay yourself back with that. But don't be fooled by the points because the points is like, what, 1% of every dollar? That's like a penny. You know what I'm saying? So I max my shit out, or not max my shit out. I shouldn't say that. I spend everything that I know I'm going to spend on that month on that credit card. I pay it all off. I get the points. And after I've accumulated enough points, then I use those points to pay off the credit card to, whatever I can. It's going to be like $100, $126 after a while. And then that's how you could use a credit card. Just don't keep on spending more than what you make. That's all it is. And for that, it's like what you said, Sam, you got to find out how much you're spending.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, that's like the most simple way of putting it.
Yeah.
Know what you make and don't spend more than what you make. Right? I don't know, like, and that's, I guess it sounds easy, but so much of it, the reality is this. Like, the reality is people are attached to a lifestyle. People are attached to what they think they enjoy and the lifestyle that they want to live, and that's what ends up fucking people up. But most people are in debt because you are attached to a lifestyle. And when I say lifestyle, again, it doesn't mean like grandiose things. It doesn't mean that, oh, I'm going to go fly somewhere every weekend. Oh, I'm going to go buy Gucci and Christian Dior and like, stuff like that. That's not necessarily what it means, but the lifestyle could be, oh, for like specifically, like I'll speak to like bartenders, right? The lifestyle could be, oh, I got cashed out 200 tonight. I made 200 tonight during service, right? I can go to the bar. I can go to a bar tonight and just have a couple drinks, right? And that's $20, $30, right? You do that
That's
every
it.
night. Yeah. You do that every night, you know, you do that 5 nights a week, that's $100 to $150 over the course of a month. That's $600 that you just did that with, right? And so it's very tempting when you're in an industry that you're just constantly getting paid in cash a lot of times to spend it when you have it in your pocket. So what I ended up doing a lot of times is I wouldn't even touch the cash that I made. Like I would just put that to the side, live off of what I'm making on my paycheck, and at the end of the month, boom, whatever cash I had goes into a savings account or goes back into my checking account, whatever it is. But I'm not even going to touch that. Like that's just going to be extra income for me to not like to account for later on. But like that's the lifestyle that I'm talking about. It's not. It doesn't have to be big things. It could be all right. Graham Stephan talks about this all the time, right? You go to Starbucks every day, spending $4, $5 on a coffee. That builds up over time. That's over a course of 30 days. If you do that every day, that $4 coffee is worth $120 a month. What can you put that $120 towards? So I mean, there are small lifestyle things for everybody, and we all have our own ways of justifying the things we want to spend money on. But the reality is, if you really want to get somewhere in terms of understanding your money, you have to be willing to make those lifestyle sacrifices for yourself and say, you know what, let me start making my coffee at home. Let me, instead of going out to drink after my shift every night, let me just go home, maybe buy a 6-pack of beer and drink it at home if like that's really what I want. Maybe I don't need to buy $1,000 worth of weed every month, and I just need I need to relax. Like it's those type of expenses.
$1,000, god damn.
I'm saying, man, some people smoke a lot.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
know.
That's when you need to start growing it at that point. You spending that
Yeah.
much, you know how much money you could get, fucking how many seeds you can buy for
It's
$1,000?
true, but that's like at the end of the day, that's to me is what it is. What are you spending your money on? Do you know what you're spending money on? If you don't know what you're spending your money on, find out, and then you'll figure it out.
Earn Your Leisure is one of those one of my favorite podcasts that I got put onto, and just Instagram accounts to follow because they're so fucking real about some shit. And sometimes I don't agree with some of the shit that they do, and sometimes I'm like fucking dope. So Earn Your Leisure is one of my favorites. But it started becoming a game to me when I started paying myself first, because before I'd never had a savings account, never, and when I started doing that, I saw how quickly I was able to stack up money, something that I could never do before. And granted, that comes with that didn't come until after I really started understanding money, how it works, and really knowing how much I'm spending, right? Knowing where it's going to. Because then you're able to, as soon as you know how much you're spending, you're already getting yourself a raise, because you're going to find some shit on there that you're like, I didn't know I was blowing that much money on this shit. Let me deduct $200 a week, you know what I mean, from going out to eat and shit like that. You already made $200 a week. So, where was I going? Hold on. Oh yeah. So I started making it a game. So I started paying myself $500 first, and then I wanted to decide how much I actually wanted to spend. Not just how much I'm spending, but how much do I actually want to spend, and how much more can I save at the end of the month. So it became a game for me. You got to put money aside for taxes. Well, it's different because I'm a barber, so I can definitely control a little bit more of my income as long as I'm busy. And if I'm busy, is by me also going out to hunt and promoting yourself, right? So at the end of it, I'm like, well, if I want to reach this goal more, then either I cut more heads or I spend less money on stupid shit that I don't need, right? And yeah, that's pay yourself first, and then try to pay yourself at the end of the month as well. Like like you were saying, put whatever you have left over into a savings or a checkings, and then start learning more about investments. How do you invest into yourself? As barbers, we have to do a retirement account for ourselves. Maybe some people don't, but that's what you should be doing. And because you're independent and because you're a small business, you're able to put I think you're able to put in more than what people that have 401ks could put in. But I mean, I'm confused with a lot of that shit because I don't have a 401k because I don't have a W-2, and I'm sure those are linked to together. But I can do my own independent retirement account, and you could put up to $6,500 a year into that shit. And I recommend that because then you start playing with stocks and you start learning a little bit more. There's levels to it and finding out more and more. And there's always more that you can learn. That's like this morning when you were telling me about the splitting of the stocks. I'm like, okay, I don't know the splitting of the stocks. I don't know how that goes and what Apple or Tesla are doing.
Yeah.
So that's freaking solid.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is a game. It's like a Sega Genesis game. It's like a Nintendo game, right? It's like there are levels, and you just got to unlock the next level. And when you unlock the next level, you might not necessarily be good at that level for the first
It's that
time trying
threshold.
it. But you learn. You learn on that level. Like, oh, this is when this bad guy comes out. I know I got to go over here. I got to do this. And so every time you level up, if you're open to it, there's stuff that you can learn. And just like you're talking about, to me, once you get past, and again, this goes back to like Dave Ramsey's baby steps, right? You put aside, $1,000 for your emergency. You pay off all of your high interest debt, and then you start to build that 3 to 6 month fund, emergency fund, right? And then from there, you can really start. You from that point on, it just gets fun. It gets fun to like learn about compound interest and learn about like the growth in the stock market, and to learn about different ways of investing. One thing that I will say, I'm not any financial advisor. We can't give legal advice. Like, don't take any of this as like stuff that you should do necessarily. But my favorite part of all of this was figuring out how to have fun with it, right? And when I say that, it's like, all right, 20%. At times it's been 30, at times it's been 40. Like, whatever we take out, I split that in half. At this point, half of it goes into our savings account, and then half of it goes into our investments account. And then what I do with the investments account is basically, as I've gotten to learn, and I'm not a person that like knows like a lot, but it's just like learning every day. I'll take the portion that I put in my investment account, and I will put most of that money into long-term investments like index funds and ETFs that are proven winners in the market, so that it can build growth over time. And then I'm a big believer in cryptocurrency, so I'll put a good portion of that amount into cryptocurrency as well. And then the rest of that I'll kind of play around as I learn the market and as I learn stocks with individual stocks, penny stocks, to try to figure out option plays and not just option plays, but option plays in like day trading. Low investment stuff that might be high returns quickly, but also they're not, I can take the L because I have security on the back end with index funds and ETFs, but also with my savings account. Once you start to build that safety net for yourself, you're able to play with your money in a different way. That's like, all right, I can really learn, but I can also take L's with it, right? And when I say take an L, it doesn't necessarily have to be only in like stocks or the market. You could take it. You could be willing to take L and say, you know what, I have money, and so instead of spending $500 on eating out this month, I'm going to take $400 of that and apply for an online course. It may be nothing in the online course comes like it. I don't take anything from it, maybe, but maybe I learn a skill that I'm able to create more income for myself, right? Maybe you take $400 out every month over the course of 10 months. You got $4,000. You apply for like a coding boot camp. You learn how to code. And then, you can build a skill set that can allow you to increase your income and your net worth over a period of time. But if you don't learn anything from it, cool. Then that's an L I could take because I have security. It's money I can just utilize to potentially invest in myself. or to potentially invest in a business idea that I have, and not be so afraid to take L's like that.
If you don't mind,
Yeah.
uh, I just started laughing because I was like, how would I, what would I say? So to all the young me's out there, right? So I'm talking to my younger self and to anybody that's listening that is a younger self of mine, right? That has fucked up over and over and over. Just, just a bunch of struggles that you've taken on. When we talk about this, I remember if I was younger and I was listening to this conversation, I'd be like, man, fuck you. You make way more money than I do. I can't afford this. I can't afford that. And there's no way I'm gonna be able to pay myself 500. I can't even make that much in this. And I'll tell you, if you knew who the fuck I was before this shit, you would understand that it is extremely possible to do. I remember I laugh because like, you remember that first episode of Atlanta? Did you watch Atlanta?
Nah.
Oh, bro, so fucking good. There's an episode that he goes and takes his girl out. Dead on me. I swear, you could ask the mother of my child. You could ask my wife. Did you ever watch Sorry to Bother You?
Yeah.
Dude, 40 on 10 or whatever, when he drops to 40 cents. I remember I was in LA and I was putting in gas. I was on the phone with my boy Derek and I was putting in gas and I was like, could I get 4 on 6? And he was like, bro, how are you putting less money than the number of the pump that's on there? And I'll never forget that, right? So what I'm trying to tell the younger me who may be listening to this is, one, you'll be able to get to it, but you'll never be able to get to it if you don't start taking control of finding out how much you're spending, because your boat is fucking sinking. So make sure, I mean, it just, to me, like whenever we talk about this, it all just goes right back that you can't have this much fun. You can't start having fun with money. And it sounds very intimidating if you don't take that first step of figuring out how much you're spending. Like, and I just got to remind, even though we go further and start going up and up in levels, is that we can't get there until you understand where you're at right now. And even if you don't make that much money right now, start trying to set your life up. Say, like, if you're spending too much money on rent because it's expensive, take that humble pill for a bit. Find out how you can spend 30% on rent. So if you have to roommate with a couple people, fucking sleep in a closet for a bit. I'm hoping you're single. Do that at that 30%
That's what it
mark.
is. Yeah, 100%. That's what it is. Is like we're so attached to a lifestyle and we're so attached to like the freedom or whatever that you're not willing to humble yourself and just to be like, I gotta stay at home with my parents a little longer. I gotta be roommates with 4 different people. I gotta not have the newest iPhone. I gotta, maybe not buy a new car, but just buy a beater that I could commute with, or maybe not even a car. Maybe I just buy a bike and take Bart and like, or like some people. I used to be this way. I used to be like, nah, I ain't taking the bus. Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to be caught on the bus because I make money. But then at the same time, it's like I was spending more money, on my car than I would have just been spending if I just decided to take the bus or walk or bike to work every now and then, So it's like all the little things in terms of just humbling yourself to be like, all right, I can't afford the life that I want, but over time I will be able to. So even like you were saying, for like the folks that can't do it, when I talk about 500 or 400 or 20% of your paycheck, start with $20. Start with $20 out of every paycheck, or start with $50 a month, or start with $10, start with $5.
Just get the habit.
Put it away. Yeah, or like make it a physical thing, right? Literally put $10 into a jar like we used to do with piggy banks, and you see it build over time, and then it's like, all right, it's like the same thing I think about fitness, right? It's like when you're in it every day, when you're going to the gym every day, you don't see the progress in yourself a lot of times. But then if you look at a picture of yourself from like a year ago, you're like, oh shit, I didn't even realize that's all the progress I made. So $5 doesn't feel like a lot if it's like once a week or once every other week. But over the course of 52 weeks, it's a different story.
And it changes your mind, right? It changes your whole mindset on money. Like it's hard to say this and you're like, yeah, I know all that. But once you start with truthful doing comes the emotion. And when you start doing this and you understand it, it changes the whole game because mentally you're now a different person. And now I don't care if I'm not making as much money now because of this pandemic as I was before, because I know how money works. I know how it works. And so now I'm like, I'm going to be all right. I'll find another way to make money. It's not about that, but it's about what am I going to do with that money once I do get it? Like, do I know how to handle that? Do I know how to take that? So it's like, I think T.I. and all that says, where it's like you could take all the money. I'm going to fucking butcher that fucking line. But I'm not even going to try anymore. But, you can start all over and still make money. And that's not for cockiness. That's not for like, oh, I'm that good at what I do. But that's more because I understand how to do it. And I understand that it might take me a little bit longer, but if I go on this pace and I continue this habit and this lifestyle, I'm going to get to the top, or I'm going to get to my goal. And usually your goal isn't shining. Your goal is financial security. Your goal is not, it's not being without. It's to feel comfortable and like, this is my sweet spot. Same thing when it comes to the credit score. Same thing that comes to everything else. It's just being and understanding what it is that you want in life. And usually we just want shelter with no worries about it. We want food without worries about it. We want to be able to go out and be like, okay, this is how much I got. And not because I'm balling, but because I have that much money for it.
But also, like you're talking about, is like get the image out of your head, bro. Get some people have an image of their head of what it means to be financially stable, right? And like to me, sometimes I walk down. It's gonna sound like an asshole thing to say. I'm like, the fuck do I got to floss for at this point in my life? Who the fuck do I got to flaunt for?
Yeah.
Like what would I want? Like, no.
Yeah.
Like to me, I'm like, why the fuck do I need $300 shoes on? When to me, I'd rather just have that money in investments.
like put the 300 that you'd buy on those Nikes or on those Taboo New Yorks or whatever the fuck you're gonna spend that on, and invest into the fucking company. You know what I mean? Fuck it. Yeah. Why not buy buy part of it?
Like Nippo would always say, all money in, no money out. When you bring that money, when you make money, you keep it in house and you invest in yourself and you invest in your businesses and you invest in like the people around you, instead of spending money on. Why would I spend money on another brand when I can just create a brand and spend money building that brand?
Right.
Why would I spend money on, going out to other restaurants when I could just spend money or invest money in building a restaurant? Or whatever,
I learned that from being broke. I learned that because I had no choice. I couldn't buy other brands. I couldn't even buy that. So I'm like, well, I guess I got to do this myself. My lady used to, I think I got with her because when I was dating with her, I went out on a date with her and I had this Express shirt. And Express is one of the shittiest fabrics out there. Like their shirts are tight, they fit great, but that fucking piece of shit fabric would rip hella quick. And it wasn't because I was wearing a schmedium. It was just because it was whack. But anyway, I ripped a hole in my pocket. And I ended up getting one of my old undershirts, my white T-shirt, and I fucking stitched the hole with white. And it was a gray shirt with a white little hole on there that was a patch. And I think that got her for not just my resourcefulness, but just for the reality of like, yo, man, it is what it is. I can't do shit about it. Like I'm not gonna go and buy a whole nother shirt because I can't. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna create my own. And I think being broke is what sparked the desire in me to just not be broke anymore, because it's like you can't do anything, so. And then that sparked the entrepreneurialness in me. It's like you gotta survive, bro. You gotta survive out
sometimes here. Sometimes you gotta reach that point. Sometimes you gotta reach that point.
Thank God.
The main thing we really just want to get across to people, and it's the case with a lot of the things that we talk about, is just there are steps you have to take in order to get to wherever you want in life, right? And my belief with a lot of these things, with a lot of just wellness, right? There's different types of wellness: financial, like mental wellness, spiritual wellness, physical wellness. But financial wellness is also a big part of that in terms of operating in the society that we live in today, right? So and even when we're talking about like capitalism and like the evils that it may have in the world, the reality is that I always try to get across to people is like, this is a world that we live in. And while we may not always be happy with the world that we live in, it's important to understand it and to give yourself the best shot. You can desire to change things, but you can't change anything unless you can learn it first. And then you see where the flaws are, and you have the ability to be like, all right, a better system. This is what we can do. This is how we can educate people. So to me, it's important. It's incredibly important to just learn about money, learn about credit, to learn about financial literacy, and to understand the game of it, because it really is a game in a lot of ways. And any information we have, again, like, get a financial advisor. We're not like giving complete financial advice in terms of how to like spend your money, save your money, whatever. We both have our own ways of doing it, but it's important to learn and to just hop in and realize that if you are in debt, if you have dug yourself a hole, the only way to get out of that hole is by addressing it and figuring out a strategy that's going to work for you. So thank y'all for tuning in to another week. This is episode 8. We're going to try to get together some special plans for episode 10 for you. It's crazy to think that we're on episode 8 already. But for all of y'all that tune in weekly, thank you so much again. Don't forget to like, share, repost on all platforms, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube. And then we will see you next week, y'all.